Welcome everyone to Matthew 24. Continuing along, we're almost there. There's 28 chapters, so how do you guys feel? Great. So we're almost done. We took a break, but we always end up coming back, so that's the goal, to finish what we start, right? Okay, so Matthew 24. As Jesus was leaving the temple grounds, his disciples pointed out to him the various temple buildings. But he responded, "Do you see all these buildings? I tell you the truth, they will be completely demolished. Not one stone will be left on top of another." Later, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us when all this will happen." Excuse me. "Tell us, when will all this happen? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world?" So Jesus is explaining to them what's going to happen. And they're wanting to know when it's going to happen. So Jesus already explained to them that the buildings are all going to be destroyed. Okay? So what he's saying is there's going to be a time when everything that is destroyed goes away. And then later on, we'll find out that he's going to come back. Okay? And they're wanting to know when that time is. When all this stuff is going to happen. Okay? What sign will signal your return and the end of the world? Jesus told them, "Don't let anyone mislead you, for many will come in my name, claiming I am the Messiah." So there's going to be people that come and say, "I am the Messiah," but they're not Jesus. They're other people. Okay? So they're fakers, they're liars. "They will deceive many, and you will hear of wars and threats of wars." Okay? So a lot of people will be talking about wars and things are going to happen and bad things. But don't panic. Okay? This is Jesus' words. Okay? Remember, these are red. He said, "But don't panic." Okay? So we have to remember, we have to trust Jesus. So when he says something, we trust in what he says, right? So if he says all these things are going to happen, but don't panic, does that mean we should be afraid? No, he said don't panic. Okay? Yes, these things must take place, but the end won't follow immediately. Nation will go to war against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. You guys know what famines are? Famine is when there's a lot of hunger everywhere. A lot of people are hungry because there's not enough food. That's what famine is. And people are very desperate to eat. They really want to eat, but there's not enough food for everybody to eat. That's what a famine is.
Shortage of food.
Shortage of food. Sounds pretty bad, right? Yeah.
But not like shortage of food like in public, like the farming industries, like they don't have any. It's just
Yeah, like no chicken maybe, or no bread, or maybe no eggs, or no vegetables, or no like meat, stuff like that. That would be really bad, right? Because we all need food to survive. Okay? So he says there will be famines and earthquakes in many parts of the world. But all this is only the first of the birth pains, with more to come. So he's saying that that's only the first part. Then you will all be arrested, persecuted, and killed. Okay? You will all be arrested, persecuted, and killed. You will be hated all over the world because you are my followers. That's what he's telling to his disciples. That's what he's telling to the people who are following him, the 12 disciples. Okay? He's telling them, you guys are going to be arrested. People are going to hate you because you're saying that I'm God. Okay, that's what he's telling them. So a lot of people that were around them, they didn't believe them. They didn't believe that Jesus was God. And he's telling them, as God, he's saying that he is God, and he's saying, because you love me, a lot of people will want to arrest you, and they're going to hate you, and they're going to want to kill you, just because you're my follower, and because you love me. Make sense? And many will turn away from me and betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and will deceive many people. So he didn't say a little bit of people. How many people? Many people. He's going to deceive, the false prophets are going to deceive many people. They're going to lie to a lot of people. Sin will be rampant everywhere, and the love of many will grow cold. Okay? But the one who endures to the end will be saved. And the good news about the kingdom will be preached throughout the world so that all nations will hear it, and then the end will come. What's the good news? What is he talking about?
Like,
The good news is that Jesus Christ came to the world. Okay? He is our salvation. He died for our sins. He resurrected. And then he's in heaven. And he's going to come back. He's going to come back. And then all of us who are saved because we believe in him will be in heaven with him one day too. That's the good news. Okay?
Is that the good news? That's what they're referring to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let me just run that back again. But the one who endures to the end will be saved, and the good news about the kingdom is in heaven, what I just explained, will be preached throughout the whole world so that all nations will hear it, and then the end will come. Okay? So it says here, so that all nations will hear it, and then the end will come. So is there any nations who won't hear it? Or it said all nations, right? So think about that. That's a clue. All nations will hear, so that all nations will hear it, and then the end will come. So the end won't come first. It says, and then that comes after. Okay? The day is coming when you will see what Daniel the prophet spoke about. The sacrilegious object that causes desecration standing in the holy place. Then those in Judea must flee to the hills. A person out on the deck of a roof must not go down into the house to pack. A person out in the field must not return even to get a coat. How terrible it will be for pregnant women and for nursing mothers in those days. And pray that your flight will not be in winter or on the Sabbath. So when he says flight, he's talking about when it's time for us to basically run or just be ready to, for when his return comes. Okay? You're gonna have to be prepared on the moment, on the spot. There won't be time for you to go back and get your pillow, get your favorite toy, get things that are important to you on earth. Because remember what we said, in heaven, are things of the earth important? No. Are you paying attention? No. So, again, Jesus is saying, when it's time for, he says, pray that your flight will not be in winter or on the Sabbath, because he doesn't want you to be constrained with things that are happening here on earth. Don't go back for your shoes, don't go back for your hat, don't go back for your coat, because all that stuff is earthly stuff, and it doesn't matter. Earthly stuff doesn't matter to heavenly stuff. So, we want to make sure that we're worrying about heaven and what's important in heaven, because when we leave the earth, the only thing that matters is what's in heaven, not what's here on earth. Make sense? Alright. For there will be greater anguish than at any time since the world began. and it will never be so great again. In fact, unless that time of calamity is shortened, not a single person will survive. But it will be shortened for the sake of God's chosen ones. Then, if anyone tells you, look, here's the Messiah, or there he is, don't believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will rise up and perform great signs and wonders so as to deceive. Okay, you know what deceive is? Deceive is like to lie to people. To trick people. Okay? So they're going to rise up and perform great signs and wonders as to deceive or to trick people. If possible, even God's chosen ones. So even people who know a lot about the Bible, know a lot about Jesus, know a lot about God, even those people can be tricked. So we have to be very careful and pay attention, because even daddy's, I try to focus on a lot of stuff, but that doesn't mean that I can't be tricked somehow, or that my heart can't be hardened somehow, or something like that, right? So I have to keep my heart to God. We have to keep our hearts to God, keep our minds and our hearts open to Him. Always accept Jesus as our Lord and Savior, and we will be okay. Okay? Great signs and wonders, and even God. See, I have warned you about this ahead of time. So he's saying, I'm telling you now because it's going to happen later in the future. What do we call that when something happens happens later, but I'm telling you right now? You know. What is it? It's what you call a person also. Prophecy. It's a prophecy. So anybody who's a prophecy or who's a prophet gives prophecy. So this is a prophecy. See, I have warned you about this ahead of time. So that means he knows it's going to happen in the future, even though we're not there yet. Okay, that's prophetic language. That's called. That's prophecy. All right. You want to read 26?
You're 26?
Yeah. No. I'm sorry. So Matthew 24, but verse 26.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
I'll just read 25 again. So take note, I have told you in advance. So if they tell you, see, he's in the wilderness, don't go out. Or, see, he's in the storerooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever the carcass is, there the vultures will gather. The coming of the Son of Man. Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not shed its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky, and then all the peoples of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, with power and great glory. He will send out his angels with a loud trumpet, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the sky to the other. The parable of the fig tree. Learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its branch becomes tender and sprouts leaves, you know that summer is near. In the same way, when you see all these things, recognize that he is near, at the door. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things take place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.
Okay, so there's a lot here. This is basically, he's talking about his return. Jesus is talking about his return, but he's talking about preparation. And he's saying, even though you might not know exactly when these things are going to happen, you can still watch and be paying attention to what's happening. Maybe not when, but you know what is happening. Make sense? So if you see that things are happening, if you start seeing earthquakes, and you start seeing famines, and you start seeing all these things, you can say, hey, wait a minute. Jesus spoke about these things, and he said that this would mark when things were going to happen. Okay? And this would mark the beginning of his return. Okay? The beginning before his return. Okay? So he's teaching to watch for the signs of things to come. Okay? All right. You got a question? You wanna read? Alright, come on.
However, no one knows the days or hour when these things will happen, not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself. Only the Father knows.
Pause. Okay, so it says, however, no one knows the day or the hour when these things will happen, not even the angels in heaven or the Son himself. Only the Father knows. Okay? Now, this is a very important verse because it's saying that even though Jesus is God, that if you read it like that, you might think, well, even that means that Jesus doesn't know when that time comes. And it says here, only the Father knows. Okay? Now, if we go down here in commentary, it says, it is good that we don't know exactly when Christ will return. If we knew the precise date, we might be tempted to be lazy in our work for Christ. Worse yet, we might plan to keep sinning and then turn to God right at the end. Okay? Heaven is not our only goal. We have work to do here. And we must keep on doing it until death or until we see the unmistakable return of our Savior. Alright, so that's why we don't know. Okay? Make sense? Because we're always supposed to keep doing the right things, the good things, or trying to do the right things and the good things. And not be lazy in our work or in being and doing the right thing. Okay? Alright. So when the Son of Man returns, it will be like it was in Noah's day. In those days, I'm sorry, you were wanting to read. I'm so sorry. Go ahead. You can continue reading.
When the Son of Man returns, it will be like it was in Noah's day. In those days before the flood, the people were enjoying banquets and weddings, right up to the time Noah entered his boat. People didn't realize what was going to happen until the flood came and swept them all away. That is the way it will be when the Son of Man comes. Two men will be working together in the field. One will be taken, the other left. Two women will be grinding flour at the mill. One will be taken to the other left.
No, one will be taken, the other left.
Okay.
You want to continue or should I?
You continue.
Okay. So he's saying people didn't realize what was going to happen in the time of Noah, and much in the same way is going to be the same thing for some people in this time. Okay?
It'll come by surprise.
It'll come by surprise.
But the warnings are there. Noah gave warnings many times.
Okay? So, you too must keep watch, for you don't know what day your Lord is coming. Understand this, if a homeowner knew exactly when a burglar was coming, he would keep watch and not allow his house to be broken into. You also must be ready all the time, for the Son of Man will come when least expected. A faithful, sensible servant is one to whom the master can give the responsibility of managing his other household servants and feeding them. Okay, so a good servant is somebody who takes care of everything before his master comes back. Make sense? So, for example, if you're both more grown, you can feel on what's wrong with you. If we're both if you're both grown and say I'm out and I come back, right? I come back and the house is a mess, it's a gigantic mess. That would mean that you guys aren't doing good at keeping up the house. right? Because you know that this thing should be over there, or that thing should be picked up, or this thing or that thing, right? So if I came back, then somebody would be upset or in trouble, right? So what Jesus is saying here, what he's teaching is that a faithful, sensible servant is one who the master can give responsibility of managing his other household servants and feeding them. So in other words, be responsible, do the right things while he's gone, because when he comes back, you're gonna have to answer for everything that you did or didn't do. Make sense?
Yeah.
There you go with the foot again. What's up, man?
There's your foot. 145?
45, yeah. You wanna go?
Yeah, I'm saying we're on 45.
No.
We're on 47?
45. Oh, I'm sorry, 47, you're right.
Okay. Truly I tell you, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that wicked servant says in his heart, my master is delayed, and starts to beat his fellow servants, and eats and drinks with drunkards, that servant's master will come on a day he does not expect him, and at an hour he does not know. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
No.
The parable of the 10 virgins.
Hold on. That's 24.
Ah, okay.
So we have finished 24. And we can do 25 if you want. It's not very long. Okay, but that's it. 24 is done. Any questions?
Did anything stand out to you the most in this reading? Did anything stand out to you?
Yeah.
What?
Me and him first.
Both of you guys. Did anything that you saw was interesting or that stood out that you'll remember now, or something that's important that you think?
One is the part where Daddy was talking about, where like he gave an example how the maid were finishing early before the master came home, and the other one was when Noah told people like that what was coming, but they didn't listen.
Yeah. So we know that he's coming back, and we know what our job is. We're supposed to try to do the right thing, try to live as best as we can, because we know about Jesus' his life, and we know that he's coming back. So we want to make sure that we act as if he's already here. Why? Because he's gonna come back and he's gonna know and he's gonna ask us everything that we did and why we did it, and he knows, he can see everything. We can't hide it from him. So he's gonna say, oh, so why didn't you do this, or why didn't you do that? Why didn't you help that old lady across the street? Why didn't you help that person that didn't have any money? Why didn't you help this person that was in a wheelchair? Why didn't you help, volunteer or help somebody at the hospital? Why didn't you help the people who didn't have food to eat? He's gonna ask us all these questions and want to know why we didn't do anything. So that's why we have to always keep doing the right thing, so that when that time does come, we'll know that we were doing what our Father wanted us to do. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions?